Hi, this is Kendra from Pencil and Pigment, and today I'm going to be doing a drawing, but I also wanted to show you the two colored pencil techniques that I am using to draw these animals. That way you get something kind of out of this video, a little bit of a tutorial. If you are new to colored pencils, or you've always wanted to try colored pencils, or you have some and you're just not sure the best way to use them to create the art you want, there's two techniques I'm using. And one of them is called pressure shading. And what that means, here, let me zoom in a little bit more. Okay, that way we can really analyze what I've done. Pressure shading is where you take a colored pencil and you lightly apply it to the area, and slowly, very slowly, as you're blending the edges out, you add more and more shading, more and more pressure. It's pressure shading. So the more pressure you apply, the more color and pigment gets added to the page. And I will do a demo of both these. The second one I want to talk about is called burnishing. And burnishing is where you add the layers. You start kind of with the darkest you can. Again, all rules are meant to be broken. So you start with, it helps to start with the darkest layer, and you add the lighter and lighter and lighter, and you press down harder and harder and harder. And the final layer that goes over the colored pencil is pressed down so hard you can't see the white paper underneath. That is burnishing. Okay, and those are the two techniques I am using. So doing the pressure shading allows the white to show through. It adds, it makes it look soft, like fur. And then pressing really heavy adds an air of opaqueness, so it looks more realistic. And a lot of feathers and things don't have, there's no white showing through. It's not a soft thing. I mean, feathers are kind of soft, but for some of the looks and the way some of these animals are, you don't see the white page. So there's none of that. I press really hard. So here's my demo sketchbook. This is a Stillman Burn Epsilon. I drew on this with a technical pen. I used my Rotring Isograph for the black ink and a Posca for the white ink, and I can link the video where I'm talking about this. Again, this is the soft cover. So there's lots of drawing techniques you can do. You know, there's the hatching, the cross hatching, the stippling. I don't use those with colored pencil. That is not what I do when I'm drawing realistic animals. I don't do that. That's not a thing I do. So I use stippling with ink, and I use hatching and cross hatching with pen and ink mostly. I don't do that with colored pencil. So, and I'm using this color very specifically to demonstrate why some of this is so important. So this is the Caran d'Ache Luminous. This is Carmine Lake. It is a very deep red brown, think like brick red. This is one of my convenience colors. Again, I only own about 4 of the Caran d'Ache colored pencils. The rest are the Faber-Castell Polychromos. I will link them in the description box below. So with pressured shading, you start really light and you slowly add more and more pressure till it gets darker and darker. But you notice you can still see the white of the page. You can still see that. And this is a great technique for learning how to blend edges out, make things look softer. You don't want hard lines. Animals don't typically have hard lines in their fur and their feathers. Like, there just aren't, unless it's, you know, something very specific, there aren't a lot of hard lines. So you want things blended out. And this is a great warm-up exercise to sort of get you in the mindset, get you in the flow. And again, you could like turn it into a circle, make it a sphere, and have it the proper shading. But that's what the pressure shading. You start really, really pale and get darker and darker and darker and darker, right? And the reason I'm using this Carmine Lake is because it's heavily staining. So with using this sort of pressure shading technique, if I screw up an area, or this isn't the area, I don't want it this dark, and I try and lift it, I can't lift a lot of this color because it's so staining. You see it still, okay? I'll never be able to lift it all. And that's something you need to be mindful of with colored pencils, is depending on what pigment went into making this colored pencil. This is a Pentel eraser cap. I'll link it in the description box below. Some pigments lift really easily and some do not lift at all. They remain staining. So there's nothing you can do. Once you apply it within a certain amount of pressure, if you go to lift it, it will always be there. So when you're starting out, when you're learning, when you're working on something, doing everything really, really light, it'll always be lighter than you want, okay? And then you could come back with another layer, and you could come back with another layer to get the desired effect, okay? Pressure shading. This is really, really great for fur and creating that sort of soft effect that a lot of animals have. Now the second one is burnishing. So if I'm doing a layer of, this is the Faber-Castell Polychromos, this is black, and I am just doing a medium pressure. This is not the hardest I can press, and it's not the lightest I can press, okay? I'm doing a medium pressure. This is the darkest color. And I go back over. The final layer is going to be this Carmine Lake. And I press as hard as I can because we don't want any of the white showing through. We don't want that white page. We don't want to see it. So you can see now what the color looks like as it blends into that darker tone that I created layering the black. So this is burnishing and this is pressure shading. And these are the only two techniques I am using for all of these animals in my sketchbook. Now, if I decide I don't like that hard delineated line and I want to try and blend it out, it becomes much harder because I've already sort of coated that page. I've coated the page with the Carmine Lake. So you have to mess with it a little bit and apply a little more pressure if you're going to try and keep going over it. But there's only so much pigment you can put on a page before you just can't add anymore. Now again, if you're like, wow, this is way too dark, and you try and lift it, I'm really scrubbing the page here. A lot of colors can't be lifted. So be really, really careful the pressure you lay down. Be really mindful of what you want that desired effect to look like. And you can always have a scrap page. So if this is your drawing space on this page, this could be your scrap space. Okay, just hypothetically, this is how big your page is. 2 inches by 1 inch. And you can have your tests. You can run your tests over here. What do certain colors look like? Full pressure. What do they look like with certain colors layered on top? This is black. This is sepia. And again, I have some convenience browns just because I do a lot of animals. That saves me time. What that looks like within certain pressures, okay? And a lot of this, all of this comes from practice. It just does. So if you wanted to, in your sketchbook, one page could be the illustration, one could be the practice layers, especially if you're getting used to a new set, a new color, you've never worked with colored pencils before, this is all new to you in general, or you just want to hone in on stuff. Figuring out what colors look like layered, and this is why I kind of started with a smaller set. I bought a 36 set of the Polychromos. And from there I added about 6 convenience colors. The first one I added was a pine green because it really needed a dark green, and then a bunch of browns. And then I have about 4 Caradosh Luminance colored pencils. I don't have the world's largest collection of colored pencils. I just don't. This is it. Okay? And because of that, I'm very familiar what all these colors look like and what they do when they're layered on top of each other, because I've done drawing challenge after drawing challenge after drawing challenge with them. So this is practice. This is a lot of practice. And then, you know, if you have sort of a paper stub, a tortillon, using your finger, whatever, to help blend things out, help with edges. There's tons of like little techniques you can do on top of that. But these are the 2 drawing techniques I use when I do colored pencils. That's it. If I'm doing any dots, it's because there is a pattern to the fur or the skin or anything like that, like freckles on a face for a portrait. It's not to stipple and blend out with dots. It's for a added texture. If I'm drawing a rock, okay, here is my stone. And it's got, I don't know, like a little crack. It's got crevices. It's got little lines and textures. It's a rock. A lot of rocks have, you know, little flaws and delineations. If I put like dots and things in there, it's going to be for texture. It's not going to be for technique. Okay. This is a weird looking rock. And again, it needs like a directionality with the light. So we'll say the light's coming from here. So this is going to be the darkest point. Okay. With texture. I don't do this as a drawing technique with colored pencil. It doesn't look, it doesn't add to the realism if I go to like draw something and the whole thing is in dots. Unless it's one of those techniques where the whole thing is dots and you move away from it and you can't tell that it's dots till you move super, super close. I just don't do, dots take a long time and it aggravates my hand cramps. So stippling is just not the technique for colored pencils that I use. Pen and ink. This is all pen and ink. So getting to know your supplies. Practicing with the layering. The other thing is when you look at the different types of colored pencils, there's like student grade and there's artist grade. And you're like, well, what's the difference other than like price and availability and how to find them and purchase them in store? A lot of stores don't carry a lot of the high-end stuff just because the price point's too high and it's not a huge shelf mover. So these are really soft. These are really soft colored pencils, which makes them absolutely wonderful for blending. They're very pigmented. They're light fast. You can do commissions and drawings and things for people and not have to worry about stuff fading over time when you're creating. Just know that because they're so soft, because they blend out so well, it is really hard to maintain a fine tip because it's soft. So what happens is, as you get to using your product and you're filling a page and you're creating, you're gonna have to sharpen it more. So you're going to go through the colored pencil much faster. This one's fairly new. Especially if you work small. The smaller you work with, the softer the pencil, the more you're going to have to sharpen it to maintain that fine point, to get in there for those teeny tiny details, the antenna, the tiny legs, you know, the individual furs. Like if you're drawing, let me find a thing. If you're drawing individual hairs and fur, you're really gonna have to stroke, 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 stroke. If you're trying to maintain a certain line weight, you will have to sharpen more and more and more. And so you go through them faster. So it becomes one of those things where you have to look at the type of art you create and the size you prefer to create in and really assess, is it worth the value to buy a really high grade colored pencils? I'm going to go through them faster. It's going to cost me more in the long run, but if they're gifts or if they're commissions, if you're ready to level up from student grade to artist grade, you just want a nicer colored pencil, like look at the pros and cons. And you can make one of those decision matrices, you know, pro, con, pro, con. So the pros and cons of purchasing a high-end and the pros and cons of purchasing a student grade. So the pros and cons, you would look at this and go, well, I need help blending. It's much easier to blend with softer colored pencils, but they cost more and I'm going to go through them faster. Whereas if I stay with the student grade, I don't go through them as fast. They're better on my budget. I'm not doing gifts and commissions anyway. I'm just trying to learn. Like all this can be done with Prismacolor pencils. There's a bunch of colored pencils that are absolutely fine. These are the top two that I use that are artist grade because I'm an artist. So again, I'm not telling you to rush out and buy all the things. I'm absolutely not telling you to do that. What's best is what's preference and what's best is what you already own. I'm just trying to show you the two techniques I have. And if you're thinking about leveling up to a higher grade of art supply, really assess where you're at and what your needs are. Because if you hardly ever colored pencil, and it's not really a medium that speaks to you, maybe it doesn't make sense to invest in a set. You know what I'm saying? Whereas if it's something that you're really sort of getting into and you're really loving them and you're starting to add them to all your other pieces and your mixed media works, you know, wait for a sale or buy the 3 or 4 convenience colors you need and, you know, assess from there. And then here's where you would draw the thing. Okay, so pressure shading and burnishing. That's my demo for this. So today I am drawing a frog. This is just a bent paper clip. Yeah. All right, I'm pretty zoomed in here. And I am just using, I don't know, this is a brown. And I don't even think there's anything left to show you for the name. I'm going to assume this is just my regular brown. I have a Van Dyke brown. I have a solid brown. Here, let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, I'm zoomed out. I wanted to make just a quick note that all of my animals that I'm drawing, they're either facing forward, they're at a little bit of an angle, some are even profile, but none of my animals are facing to the left. And this is just for an overall cohesion of my sketchbook. This is sort of how I curate my sketchbooks a little bit. I try and be as thoughtful as possible to make sure that there's a gentle flow and they all sort of look and act the same. So all of mine are breaking free from the sketchbook. None of them are going towards it. So I am gently sketching out. I am using a brown. I am doing a frog. This is, and I don't know if I can even pronounce this, the Cherokee Harlequin frog. It's a toad. And he's from Costa Rica and Panama. He is extinct. He is one of the ones that doesn't have a definitive date, but they haven't seen in a long time. And I'm kind of having trouble with this sketchbook challenge. Like, I want it to be as accurate as possible, and there's just no way because they don't call extinction on things for a long time with some stuff. So I could just do the last seen date maybe. Here's his arm. And all I'm doing is trying to get the gentle shape of him. And yeah, I want both his hands in here. I want things for him. But he's beautiful. He's sort of the Carmine Lake. He's a lot of reds. He's pale blue. And a lot of these animals in this sketchbook are a lot of browns, which is awesome. But there aren't a lot of varying colors. So it's always nice when I find one that's, I can add a little bit of color to my sketchbook. So I have just gently drawn out the shape, and you're like, that was too fast. I've been doing this for years. So when an artist on a YouTube channel shows you themselves sketching or drawing out a shape or doing a thing, keep in mind that it's not just their will and want and everything. It's the years of experience they pull up to do this. So if I'm drawing something at a really fast clip and you're like, that's not, that would take me way longer. Understand that I've done drawing challenges for years back to back, that I've been drawing for years back to back, that's what this looks like. And then it's also my comfort level with this art supply. I'm very comfortable with this art supply. I've used it since 2021. And I am comfortable with this paper. So I've been using this paper for years. All this stuff I'm really familiar with. So when drawing an animal I've never drawn before, and I have drawn frogs and toads, it's going to be at a faster pace because of my years of experience and because of my comfort level with this stuff, okay? So if you're following a creator on YouTube and you're following one of their tutorials and they're going super quick and it's discouraging or frustrating to you, understand what they pull up. I'm pulling up over a decade of experience. I'm pulling up years and years and years and hours and hours and hours of practice with both these products, okay? So do not let that discourage you. Don't let that deter you. Sometimes it's things like artists don't talk about that a lot when they go to show something. Like how many times have I drawn an animal? Hundreds, thousands. How many hours have I dedicated? Thousands and thousands of hours to drawing animals, okay? So please don't let any of this discourage you when you're following along or trying to understand what somebody's doing. I'm starting with the pale blue. Here, let me zoom in again. Just don't be discouraged. Is all I'm trying to say. Please don't be discouraged by what you see and what other artists are doing. And again, I'm just doing the pressure shading. I'm adding a pale blue color before I go in with the Carmine Lake. Okay, and again, I'm really comfortable with these products. So when I lay down a color really, really dark without, you know, pre-sketching or erasing anything or changing something up, again, it's my hours of experience, okay? That's all that is. And sometimes we on our end, as the creator, as the person making the video, really forget to mention these things sometimes. Of like, take your time, be kind with yourself. This was not an instantaneous thing. I didn't step in one day and go, bam, I am amazing at colored pencils. It didn't start out that way. In fact, I will link my oldest sketchbook tour, and it was an A4, and it's a Lecterm, it's one of these. And I did a mermaid challenge. There were animals to mermaids, and I used 5 colors. So because it was a new art supply, and I was worried about decision fatigue decision fatigue is what happens when you have too many choices and you don't know what to pick. And that can be a real huge hindrance. I wasn't comfortable with this paper, and I wasn't comfortable with the art supply. So it was the first time I used it. And so I limited my color palette to 5 colors, and my subject matter to something I was already comfortable with, which was animals. And in doing that, I got to know the colored pencils a little bit and those 5 colors very, very well. And I didn't do hyperrealism. I didn't do a ton of details. All I did was kind of outline the shape, the form of the animal, and then go in with those 5 or 6 colors and create as many details as I could, hoping that it looked fairly realistic when I was done. So that is how I got to know this art supply, even though it was something I was not familiar with. And those are absolutely things you can do to make things easier on yourself. Limit your color palette. Limit your subject matter. You can do cats every single day. I apologize for the outside noise. It's the weekend. So in getting to know the art supply, there are things you can do to make it easier on yourself. And then I spent 2 hours every day getting to know the art supply. What yellow do I want? This one. And that's built my comfort level, so then I can then work a little quicker because I got to know the product and I felt comfortable with it. Okay. So there are things you can do. I did a drawing challenge, and again, I can link my sketchbook tour playlist. I worked monochromatically. I did dark green and a dark green. It was a field book. It was a Kokio field book. And I did everything in dark green. And I did animals that blended into people. Again, you're like, I'm sensing a theme with you. Yeah, I really like portraits and I really like animals. So I combined my 2 favorite subject matters in a way that I thought would be interesting and engaging and new to me. So I wasn't bored with it. And in doing so, I got to know the one colored pencil very, very well with blending and shading and creating. And that was awesome. So if you just want to buy one colored pencil and try a thing, that's, you know, it's absolutely a choice and an option. It's a great gift. You know, pick up a sketchbook for somebody and tack on like 3 colored pencils with it. I had preconceived notions about colored pencils. I'm not too proud to admit that. I thought for a long time that colored pencils were kind of juvenile, and this definitely harkens back to don't believe everything you think, because I thought for some reason I associated colored pencils with high school, and there were a couple really good colored pencil artists in the classroom where I had my class. I took lots of art classes in high school. And I just associated it with that age group. I didn't associate it with artists, with professional artists, with adult artists. I didn't associate colored pencils with that. And I don't know when I bought these. I want to say 2021. I used it in May of 2021 was the first year I used these colored pencils. And by these, I mean the Polychromos set of 36. And I was like, oh my God, I love these. I love them. I can do really fine details. I can do weird stuff. Most of these you don't have to worry about light fastness. Again, check your purples, check your pinks. Every company has a light fast chart on their webpage. So keep in mind if it's super bright, if it's neon, it's probably not light fast. But again, if you're just filling sketchbooks, does it really matter? It's just fun things for you. So it depends on what your overall level interest is. Are you doing this to become a professional artist? Are you already a professional artist? Are you just a hobbyist, or you're just looking just to make cool stuff? It doesn't have to be deeper than that, you know? So yeah, I had a lot of preconceived notions with colored pencils, and that's on me. I spent a lot of years not using the one art supply that I genuinely really, really love. And you think about like your 5 favorite art supplies that you own, and this is one of them. Artist grade colored pencils are one of them. And if you said, well, which do you like more? The Faber-Castell Polychromos or the Caran Luminance colored pencils? I don't know. I wouldn't be able to answer that because I don't own duplicates in both brands. So I couldn't tell you, because each color and each pigment performs a little differently. They all have their own little unique personalities for blending and staining and lifting, and you know, I couldn't tell you. Because even within one set of one brand, they're all a little different, and there's subtle little nuances, and you get to know those nuances and all those things the more you create and the more you use them. So you get to know your products. You do like a drawing challenge. It's a great excuse to get to know some of your stuff. And you use a supply every day for 30 days. You really get to know the strengths and weaknesses of said supply. So I am negatively spacing out the little spots that are going to be the light blue, because again, this color doesn't lift. So, and I want to make sure that you can see what I'm doing on screen, so I am using the darker color. But it's layers of layers. So this isn't my final layer. My final layer is going to be really, really dark. Okay, it's going to be very, very dark. It won't be a layer I can lift. Now, there's nothing wrong with sort of going through and doing this in all one color and then coming back with like a pen that you can throw on top. Here's a Posca. This is the extra fine. This is the pen type. It's a 0.7. You can see that right there with the label. They call it extra fine on Blick. Anyway, they have a bullet that's 0.72, but this is the tiniest nib. There's nothing wrong with going back over and putting ink on top of it. It makes it a more mixed media experience. If you forget to sort of draw around a shape you want to have, you know, you could do gouache, you could do acrylic paint. There's tons of things you can do to layer over colored pencil, which adds a fun mixed media But if you just want to do 100% colored pencil, understanding which ones are staining, understanding what they look like, understanding how they blend, how they layer to get all the colors you need. Because you can have a set of 120. I'm not stopping you. That's not my money. You can have that set. I think Polychromos has a 120 set. Right now Jackson's is doing a giveaway for the month of January on Instagram. So you could totally try and win a set. But I'm not gonna say you ever need a set of that amount because I don't have that amount. I don't have 120 colored pencils and I'm able to draw everything I need. Okay. And again, some of that comes through the understanding of layering and what colors look like on top of each other, and you get to know the pencils you have through practice, and then you realize where your set is short and what you actually need. Because I had to buy, where are you? Okay, this is a convenience color. The Caran d'Ache Luminance, this is it's ultramarine pink, and it is a very pale, cool color pink. Now try as I might with the set I had, even pressing down lightly, I could not create a cool pink. Now I could take a cool blue and add the warm reds on top of it, but I could never get a cool pink. So I had to buy one. And this is the original pencil. I don't use it a lot. This isn't a color that I use a lot. I think if you did more botanicals or worked with things that are pastel, this would probably be of greater use to you. But I could not make this color with the set I had. I tried. And so a couple things I went to draw, I think they were mushrooms for the mycology for one of my sketchbooks. I just had to do a warm pink instead, which is totally fine. I wanted to have this color because I didn't have it and I couldn't make it. And again, that was years of me trying to figure out how to make it work, and I could never make it work. So again, you could Christmas list it or birthday list it and be like, hey, I need these 5 specific colors, or I would just like a set. But I can tell you right now that with a set of 120, I don't know how I would use all the yellows. I don't use a lot of yellows. When I do, it's mostly the darker ones. Who are you? This is cadmium yellow, 107. So, you know, and I don't gravitate towards a lot of oranges unless I'm drawing something very specific and I'm making myself draw orange, or it's just something that's come up in my list of animals. So it'd be really difficult for me to use all those colors, and I would feel like I was wasting them, which is not a good feeling. I don't ever want my supplies just to sort of sit there on my shelf and not get used. So again, that's part of my low buy and my no buy, is understanding what supplies I use and the size that I like to create in with the subject matter I prefer, and then making sure that I don't buy things that I don't need or just are unnecessary, you know? And it's sort of those small little concessions. Yes, I have colored pencils. I have every color I need at this point. I do not own a big set. So, again, this may not even be a subject matter you're interested in. You might just be here for the toad. You might be here for the challenge. Just drawing challenges in general. Like, your preferred medium may just be watercolor. And that's awesome. I can wax poetic about watercolors, but that is not the medium I'm using this month. I have a couple of videos. I did a video on my Schminke, my Hoodrum Aquarelle. That is an artist grade watercolor. I can link that one. And then I have a student grade. I have a Winsor Newton Cotman, really tiny set that I like to travel with. It's all plastic, so it doesn't set off metal detectors or anything. I travel really light, so everything comes with me. I don't have to check luggage. Yeah, so I have a plastic. And then I have a video about that, like sort of pros and cons, like things to think about when purchasing a set like that. So if you're interested in learning about a couple of the watercolor sets I have, I can link those videos as well. I have a lot of videos. I have a lot of videos and it's not easy to find all of them, and I apologize. I need to be better at organizing those playlists and things, but yeah. So that is me, and that is my story when it comes to colored pencils. So again, practice your pressure shading, practice your burnishing, understanding the difference. And there's nothing to say, okay, that you can't use a different technique for a different animal. I did not burnish here. I did not press as hard as I could for my rhino. This is just pressure shading, and he looks really, really soft. Okay, he's not as gray as he could be. It's not as accurate as it could be. Again, preference, choice. This is a little burnishing right here. And you can see that that's in the background and that's not in the light. But he's soft. He's just layers of light layers. So you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be like hyper realistic. It can just be what you prefer. And maybe when you get in the groove of drawing and you're creating your thing, you like everything really, really light. Maybe you draw on a colored substrate. So maybe you're using a colored paper like a Strathmore's Tone Tan or Tone Gray, or Hanamule's like Cappuccino book. I think they have a stone one too. And you don't need to apply all the pressure because you can let that color of the paper shine through. And that is a way to save product. That is a way to create uncolored paper. It's, again, what's best is what's preference to you. So if you prefer paper with a color to it, that's something to think about, that color is going to shine through. And then you're going to need to figure out how to do your highlights, because you can try a negative space on a Tone Tan or a Cappuccino book, but you're going to need some whites, some whites. So figuring out, and I don't use a lot of white at all. This is my original colored pencil, the white. I negative space it on these books as best as possible. Which white is the best one? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But if you're creating on paper like that, maybe you don't even want to use colored pencil white. Maybe you want to use an ink that's more opaque, or a paint, or you just want to add some of this. So you get into some other colors. There's, again, pros and cons of using different product. And you'll have to think about that when you're creating on that. So I think Stillman Burn has a brown as well. And I don't know which book it is. I'll throw up pictures of all the things I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to keep on keeping on. This illustration is going to take me probably a couple hours, realistically, to get it to where I feel comfortable with it looking like how he should look. So I hope this video helped you. I hope it inspired you. I hope it gave you a couple ideas. Practice your shading and your burnishing. It will help strengthen your skills, especially if you're working on realism, if you're working on animals. The same applies to botanicals when you're looking at the softness of flower petals or the opaqueness of a leaf. It all applies. Okay, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.